Hello, Crystal Palace, and welcome to the Upper Norwood Library Hub's Library Live Lunch. This is a place to share positive and local information and find out about the wonderful community in greater depth and try to keep us all connected during this time. Today, we are joined by Carole Evans. Carole is a local photographer. If you want to say hello, Carole.
Hi, everyone.
Carole, so what is it that you do?
So I'm a photographer, but with a fine art practice, which basically means that I don't shoot commercially. So I have done in the past, but right now I shoot my own personal projects and then exhibit them. And I tend to enjoy exhibiting work to people who wouldn't necessarily go into an art gallery. So I work with communities a lot. I've done a project in Brixton before the sort of gentrification, where I had a unit for a week and photographed passers-by and exhibited them, and then they could take their prints. And I suppose I've done a similar thing recently during lockdown in my street, photographing the community. So that's kind of my art practice. And then I also teach contextual studies at Ravensbourne University, which is the money earner.
So I can see some wonderful pictures behind you, and this is part of your new project, the Lockdown Project. Do you want to talk to us about that?
Sure. So this is a project that I'm calling Through the Looking Glass, and it's basically photographs of my neighbours through their front windows. I had the inspiration right at the beginning of lockdown, actually. So we locked down on the 23rd of March, and then I was walking down the street one day and I started chatting to one of my neighbours through her window, and communication was very easy, and we had this social distancing, and there were all these reflections going on of the outside world in her face, and I really liked the kind of images that was making, and I thought that this would be interesting to photograph, and it would be an interesting way to kind of photograph what's happening where we're all isolated in our homes, and kind of the outside world is not sort of penetrable. So that was the kind of visual inspiration. And also what happened at lockdown was that we have a WhatsApp group for our street that suddenly kind of blossomed. I think it existed before, but somebody had put notes through people's letterboxes and with the number. So I joined that, and suddenly there was all this kind of help around us, and there was people offering to do shopping for the elderly, and borrow jigsaws off one another, and share seedlings and all this sorts of stuff. And after 7 years of living here, it was the first time I got to know my neighbours. So the two things combined made me think that this would be a really interesting project to document this time and document this community that I've only just discovered after 7 years.
Just out of my curiosity, how many of your neighbours did you actually manage to photograph?
Yeah, so I started off by putting a call out on the WhatsApp group saying, I'm interested in, I'd like to photograph you through your front windows, who's interested? And the response was quite good initially. I had, in that first evening, maybe 8 or 10 neighbours were like, oh yeah, great idea, good. And then it just kind of blossomed from there. So people, they would talk to one another, and obviously there's neighbours who are not on WhatsApp groups, so they would talk to their neighbours if they knew them. And at VE Day, we were supposed to have a street party, like we had applied for a street party, but obviously they were cancelled. But a lot of people did sort of sat in their front gardens or on the street and chatted. And so I went round with leaflets to people who I didn't know yet, and told them I was doing this project. I think, and I also leafleted doorways as well, because I knew that not everyone was on the WhatsApp group. I decided to stop the project on the 1st of July, although the 4th of July, which was the day that kind of we were allowed to go in pubs again. And so I thought it was the day it was more people were likely to be out and about, and lockdown was easy, and I just felt like it was a nice time to draw a line under it. Overall, I've photographed 36 neighbours, and then I still want to photograph my family somehow too. So and that's good because there's about 80 houses on the street, so it's almost half. So I feel like that's kind of a nice, neat number.
Yeah, that's 36 new friends, really.
Yeah, and that's been the most interesting thing, is meeting people. And what's lovely about it is it's become a real community project. So these prints were made by a guy who runs like he's opposite over there, who runs a printing business. So he'd made the prints for me. Met a young girl down the road who's a retoucher, so she kind of looked at all the colour toning for me. There's a copywriter down the road, and she was I was asking neighbours questionnaires and getting model release forms, and Ellie, the copywriter, was just kind of putting these into little quotes, which we might use one day on a website or something. Actually, we do have a plan. And the plan is that there's a graphic designer who lives next door, but two, and he's offered to make a book. So hopefully, with all these people that are kind of helping out and pitching in with their expertise, we're going to make a book to kind of commemorate this weird time that we've just lived in.
It sounds like you've truly managed to put the collaboration aspect into community, which is a very necessary thing to do in these times. Is that like the aim, the ethos behind your work, do you reckon?
Yeah, definitely. And I think I'm learning that more and more. So yeah, it's interesting. I think I've been a photographer for 15 years, and I'm only still just working out how all my projects fit in and all the things that are common. But collaboration is definitely one of them. And that kind of collaboration, but also bringing it to making sure everybody's involved and can see it, that it's not this elitist art project that's in this white walls. Like, I'm really kind of anti that a bit. So I did a project up in Altrincham, where I'm from, in South Manchester, where to commemorate the centenary of World War One, and I photographed men from the area using an old Victorian process called wet plate collodion, and it was to commemorate this one street, which is known as the bravest little street in England for the amount of volunteers that went to war and didn't come home. And so that was a real kind of collaboration between the residents of my hometown, which was then displayed there, and all that kind of thing. So yeah, I think it's important that people are involved, because then I think art can become an education. You learn from it. Yeah.
So you said before that you also had an exhibition in Brixton, and then talking about the Centenary Project.
Yeah.
How have they differed in terms of this project? Obviously, you're not actually coming face to face with people, but in also camera formats as well. Are you shooting film? Were you doing digital?
No, right. So I'm glad you brought that up, because I was going to forget to mention it. I used my Hasselblad. So Hasselblad, I should have it. I don't have it to show you, but it's like a big medium format camera, and it creates square images. So and I was also shooting on slide film, which got quite expensive. The reason for that was because I had a bunch lying around at the beginning, and I thought, where am I going to buy stuff at the moment? So I used that film, and then I realized that I loved it, because slide film, well, the colors are really saturated, but also you see through it, just like you see through a window, and it just kind of all sort of fitted in this neat way. But I was really lucky, because I got funding from the Swiss Cultural Foundation, because I'm half Swiss, and they had this call out for projects in lockdown, and I'm glad I've remembered to mention them. So they helped me contribute to the cost of the film, and then also the printing and all that sort of thing. So yeah, that was useful. But I like using film. I like using old processes, analog processes. To me, it contributes to the story in a way. Like, they help, even though you can't tell this is on slide film. I don't know, somehow for me it kind of contributes to what I'm trying to say and how I'm saying it. And it also really slows me down. Like, I have, because it's expensive, and I have like 12 frames on a film, I've got to really consider the composition in each one and make sure that people are not blinking, or, dogs are not kind of running around like crazy. And I think it just makes me a better photographer. But I know that's not the case for everyone, so I don't preach it. But it's good for me. Yeah.
One of, like, because I use film as well, and I think one of the things is that you've really got that snapshot of it as well, and for some reason it even shows when you've shot on film that you're really looking at like that moment in that time, instead of it being like so many angles, so many frames, like, oh, I need my jawline to be out in that moment. Like,
Yeah.
it's about the actual moment.
It's more considered, and I think for when you're shooting portraits, it's quite impressive for the sitter to be confronted with this big honking camera that makes this loud click. And so I think they feel a little bit more like they kind of settle in. I don't know, it takes longer, so they sort of settle, they're less fidgety, and they kind of go off in a bit of a reverie. And I kind of like that way of capturing portraits. I'm not a fast shooter.
Were there any challenges you faced when shooting? Was it like, okay, we've
Yeah.
got this planned, and then, I mean, I'd say rain, but I don't know.
The weather was not a challenge. And the beauty of it was that if it was raining, they're only down the road, you can kind of rearrange very quickly. But the weather was great. Double glazing is a big challenge when you're trying to shoot through a window. It makes all these weird, like, old Victorian panes of glass are lovely because they make these reflections and they're just very clean and neat. But double glazing, you get all these weird, like, I don't know, it made it very tricky. So that was one challenge. Light, generally, like, there's one side of the street that gets sunlight really bright, and that the contrast, but I don't mind that really. And then just the different windows, some have these loads of space and some kind of chopped up with all these white PVCs. It's kind of getting people so that they're not blocked up. And yeah, I like those challenges though. They're kind of, you have to, it's good to have a challenge, isn't it? And it all sort of worked out. I did have to reshoot a few people because they just didn't come out, or I wasn't happy, but they were usually fine with that.
Overall, they seem like quite happy challenges. There's nothing wrong with a bit of a challenge because it means that you're learning.
Yeah, of course, always learning. And like animal, they say, don't they, never shoot, don't work with animals or children. And yeah, there's a lot of children on the street, and obviously families love to be photographed, don't they? So that, yeah, they could be challenging in a nice, cute way. And I wanted animals, I wanted pets, but cats were elusive. So they were not interested. I got some dogs though, so I'm happy with that.
You were mentioning that you're going to turn it into a book with the fellow next door. Has everyone signed up for their own copy? It's like when the local community centre do like a calendar. It's like everyone needs one. This is
what I'm hoping. So I haven't really. I thought I'd get. So basically, these are going to be exhibited tomorrow on our street, and then that's the kind of my first stage in this. So I'm going to document it and kind of interview people, film people, sort of talking about what it was like to be part of this project. And then that's going to become a crowdfunding video. So I'm going to crowdfund for the book and just hope that, yeah, people are going to want a copy and they're going to want to send you know, long lost cousin in Australia a copy and all that sort of thing. Um, and we'll just have to see. I mean, you know, on the one hand, it feels like a bit of a vanity project, but on the other hand, all art is, in a sense. And I just think that in years to come, well, I hope, in years to come, we're going to look back at this time and it's going to be a slice of history, isn't it? And it's going to be taught in schools, and it's going to be, you know, oh, do you remember the lockdown, the great lockdown 2020, and what were you doing at that time, and where were you? And our children are going to remember it, and they'll be then telling their children. And I think it's important that we have a document of what it was like, because it's such a strange time, quite dystopian in a lot of ways. And the other thing to mention, I suppose, is that I'm not alone in doing this project. This is like the obvious photography project, and there's loads of photographers doing it all around the country. But I also think that's really interesting because we're all in the same boat, you know. Every town in this country and in many countries in the world have experienced this lockdown, have experienced these kind of isolated times.
It's been I mean, the Library Hub itself have a project with the Arts Council at the moment called Alone Together. And I think all of these projects cropping up where the physical lens and the metaphorical lenses are really being looked back at the people in the community, instead of it all being like, what were we giving? It's like,
yeah,
shining a light on the personal experience. And you're part of that. Your project is part of that as well.
But I think you've hit on a really good point, because I think it's also made a lot of people realise that what's important to them during this lockdown, you know, and that actually what's important is having a home, is having family nearby. And my parents were up in Manchester, and it's been hard. That's been hard, you know, having that distance for such a long time. And I don't know. I don't know if it's enough to kind of change the world and sort of stop being so consumery and all this, but I do feel like it's changed our perspective on what's important, and that what's important are things that are close to our hearts and to our homes, really.
I agree. I don't know if you'd be okay with disclosing this, but if anyone watching would like to see these pictures when you display them tomorrow, where would they find them?
I know, I've been wondering about that, but yeah, I'm just gonna say we are on Stenbridge Road, which is down the hill towards Annerley and beyond, just off Croydon Road. So it's in the kind of hub of Stuart Fleming Primary School. Yeah, near that. So yeah, do come down and wander around. I'm going to exhibit them tomorrow. The weather forecast is terrible, so in true community spirit that this street is displaying, we've rallied together some gazebos, and there's these 3 boards that will be displayed in 3 driveways on the street under gazebos, and hopefully be keeping dry. But I'm also going to probably display them next weekend on Saturday 22nd as well, just in the hope that it's not going to rain and they don't have to be hidden under a gazebo.
Yeah. Have you there's an official name for the project that I can't remember, but all of the art that's been cropping up in everyone's windows during lockdown, have you taken part in that?
Not sort of officially, but what I have done is made sure that I've got all the rainbows and things that have been put in the windows. So that's another kind of layer, isn't it? Is that I don't know if any of these you can see them, but there's some that are really clearly prominent. No, actually this board hasn't got any. Typical. But there's somewhere prominent rainbows, and that's also an indication of our time, isn't it? And the window is the way that we're communicating our feelings to the outside world. So actually there is one there you can't see, but there's got a Black Lives Matter poster in the bottom, because I shot that after the murder of George. So, you know, all of these things are telling these little indications that tell us that we're in this moment in 2020 where there's all this stuff happening, bubbling around under the surface. and yet we're kind of in our homes, enclosed, not quite sure what the future brings.
I believe that our tech wizard was showing one of those photos on the screen whilst you were talking. Love the technology. But yeah, I feel like things like the rainbows and the "We love you" NHS signs, I don't really see anyone taking them down, to be honest. I think they might be a permanent fixture in...
No, and why not? Yeah, why not?
I mean, some things like the clap, that kind of wasn't as consistent because obviously life kind of goes back to normal and you're not always at home, but putting something in your window, it's you don't have to do anything after it's up.
Yeah. So a window is a way of communicating in a way, isn't it? And you can get all kind of metaphorical about it in a photographical sense, because the word camera is Latin for room, and so the viewfinder is a window. And the first ever photograph taken by William Henry Fox Talbot was actually of a window, and there's all these links between photography and windows. I love your face right now. It's like the cogs are turning. Okay, oh yeah.
The literal cogs were just...
The cogs were visible. They were visible. So, and I like all that as well. Like a window is something that photographers are always drawn to, whether it be photographing through or using the light from them. So we're both sitting here and I can tell your window's on that side because of the way the light's falling on your face. And it's always a beautiful light, especially when it's a grey day, actually. So windows are really important for photographers, but they're really important for telling our stories. And also for our homes, because if we did not have a window, we wouldn't have any light.
I stayed in a windowless room in New York once, and
do you know what? I've had that experience as well in Mexico. It was horrid.
It's very well, I guess it's quite self-reflecting. When you can't look outside, you're forced to look inside. But
yeah,
not sure how much
why prisons don't have windows. Yeah.
I really did not know that that's what camera meant. My mind is actually...
Mine's going. Yeah.
It's cool though, because now your project, when it is physically looking at windows, and then there's the whole concept behind it, it's kind of canonized within that history.
Yeah.
As well.
Yeah. Nice. I like that.
20 years down the line, someone's going to be studying this probably.
But I think that's why this has been, honestly, I need to mention some other people who have been doing this, because there's a photographer called Kira Leeming in Manchester. She's done one. There's Sarah Wheel in Lewis. I'm not going to remember that. It's Ruth Medjabar, I think you say it, in Northern Ireland, and actually Penguin has picked that up as it's going to be a book, because she's done these beautiful portraits just at twilight. So it's all dark outside, and there's just the people are lit by the lights in their rooms, and it's a really nice way of doing it. It's interesting that there's a lot of women that are doing this. I'm not sure. I haven't really thought about why that might be. Perhaps a link between women and domestic spaces. I don't know. Anyway, and there's a couple of guys. There's a guy in Cardiff that did it, and a guy in Bristol. Can't remember their names. But the point is that people have kind of a lot. I'm not alone in thinking that this is a good opportunity this is a good way of photographing communities in this time. Like, it meets social distancing. It's got that kind of link with the photography and the history of photography, and then it's got this sort of public-private sort of tension where you're kind of peering into a private space, aren't you? You're not really supposed to go up and look in somebody's front window, but here I am. That's exactly what I'm doing.
It's always one of those things when you're on the well, for me anyway, the second level of a bus, the upper level, and then suddenly you're exposed to the second level of people's faces, and you're like, I can't help but to look. You don't really get that insight when you're just walking around.
And autumn is the best month, because it's when lights are drawing in and people have their lights on, but they haven't drawn their curtains yet. And yeah, wandering around, peering in if you can, is fun. Yeah, we want to see, don't we? We want to see what other people's houses look like. That's why all those home shows on TV are really popular. And I don't know, isn't these pictures interesting because there's a little glimpse of what the home is like, but then there's also this outdoor reflection kind of obscuring that, so it's never very, very clear. So there's lots going on.
Have you bumped into anyone in the street since lockdown's kind of lifted that you only kind of met through the window before?
Oh yeah, loads. Like, we came back from Cornwall the other day, and there's a guy down the road in our photograph with his family, and he was walking past. He's like, "Oh, do you need anything from Tesco? She just got back from holiday." I was like, "Yeah, brilliant. 2 pints of milk, please." You know, that's what's brilliant, is that now we know people here, and there's the proper sense of community. Feels nice. In the big sprawl of London, it feels really nice.
I agree with that. My WhatsApp group, it's probably what I talk most on. Like, I talk to my WhatsApp group more than I talk to my friends, and now people can like move around a bit more. It's less like, should I pick up medication or anything? And it's like, oh, we're putting a load of toys out front the house.
Yeah.
There, if anyone wants to get it. And it's like,
there's lots of that, isn't there? And that's our next job, actually. We want to do a collective yard sale on the street, because it's funny how everybody's been clearing out, haven't they, with lockdown? Yeah, that's been good.
When the charity shops reopened, I went, just by chance, I went on the first day, because I was just walking past and I was like, oh, and it was full of absolute gems, because
everyone's
getting rid of stuff.
Yeah. Oh, that's good. I didn't realise they were open again, actually, charity shops. Yeah, nice.
If you fancy having a look, I'd just go, yeah. Right, so thank you for chatting.
No, pleasure. Thank you. That was really fun. So can I just plug my website, or is that on?
Plug your website, plug the street exhibition, the Kickstarter, all of it.
Okay, so street exhibition tomorrow, next Saturday, on Stenbridge Road in Annerley. My website is caroleevans.co.uk, and I have an Instagram, which is _Carole_Evans_. And my name Carole is spelled with an E, so there's Carole Evans makes 2 E's in the middle, which looks weird. And then, yes, I'm going to launch a Kickstarter hopefully on the 1st of September. So I don't know if that will be on all the website and social medias and stuff. And yes, please support it, because it'd be great if it made a book.
The links for Carol's website and Instagram and everything should be posted in the comment section for the video, just in case.
Thank you.
You don't know about spellings and everything. And like she said, tomorrow it's the street party, well, the exhibition, sorry, not allowed to do street parties. But also this weekend is the Crystal Palace Festival, which is all online. You can access it through the Library Hub. So there's a lot going on. There's a lot going on this weekend. All right, guys, thank you for listening, and we will be back on Monday. Cheers. Bye.
Bye.